Yeah, so hello, Mark, Joyce, and Jonathan, Carroll. Both of you are in Ireland and Dublin. I would like to talk to you about a few things that have been on my mind lately. But before we do that, let me introduce you, if I may, very shortly. Mark, both of you, Mark and Jonathan, you finished you studied at RCA in London, Royal College of Art. Mark, you finished painting on the painting department. Jonathan, curation. Both of you are very successful at what you do and very good at what you do. Mark, being a painter and also a lecturer in fine art at the Institute of Art, Dún Laoghaire Institute of Art and Technology in Dublin. Actually, that's where we met when I was a student. And also, Jonathan, you are independent curator and an art writer, and you for a very short time you were also my lecturer in my 4th year in Dún Laoghaire. Is there anything I missed or I can add or you can add to this introduction?
No. Thank you for successful. I like that.
You're welcome.
I wish it was so. You've been away too long.
Actually, that's what we're going to talk about at some point. So this is an alternative artist talk to an exhibition that I'm having with a friend of mine, a Slovakian artist, Adam Macko, in Slovakia. So the title of the show is Degrowth, like the opposite of growth, and it's loosely based on economics. There's a theory of degrowth, which is a critical stance on the growth-based economy. So it got me thinking, which whether we can relate this to art, this idea of degrowth, which I was wondering if it's the same as descaling or something like that. But before we can talk about degrowth or your idea of what degrowth is in art. What's the opposite of it, like growth and progress in art? How do you look at it in painting and also in art writing or curation?
First, yeah, I thought you were going to move the goalposts again there, because I think yesterday you told me this was going to be about growth.
Yeah.
And was it growth and development?
Growth, progress.
Progress, yeah. And I immediately asked another ex-colleague of yours, Simon Kenny, and he said this Growth Must End, the new book by Václav Smil. I don't know if I'm pronouncing him correctly. A colleague of yours from ex-Czechoslovakia.
Never heard of him.
And in the days before you revealed what the subject was, I said, if you're somehow gathering your ex-lecturers and mentors, that we were going to discuss something about art teaching and the old mantra that art cannot be taught. So of course I put some props. I made a little exhibition here, which could fit in with your growth, because I have some of your work in my house. I have a piece here, Mr. Dabic, Unfinished Business, from I think 2009. And then in the middle, I have a nice quarantine story piece in front and behind a work of yours from 2017, which was due to go to the Royal Academy here, Royal Hibernian Academy in Dublin, and it got stuck in quarantine at the border and didn't make whatever. So it's a sort of an unexhibited work. Yeah. This work was exhibited in Dublin in 2009 in the lab in Dublin. It has the scars of it. It fell off the wall. And then on this other piece I have here is a piece by Alice Ciel, who lives in London, who you stayed with for a while before you went to Chelsea College of Art. And below I have Mark Joyce's book, Be Loud, Glade, which is quite revealing about this idea of the relationship between pupil and teacher in the art world. I'll get back to that. And then I spent days rereading Kunstlehren, Teaching Art from the Städelschule in Frankfurt, which is very interesting and about the teacher-pupil relationship as well. And in the middle, I have some Frutilüge, Bardak, which I still have a bit, which is a traditional Kosici drink, or maybe not. Is it Hungarian? But the exhibition I put on, because that's what I did with you, I would respond to objects that you exhibit, rather than giving a lecture or talking, where Mark had a lot more to do with developing and growth within your art practice.
I wasn't asking about for lectures.
Yeah.
Your idea in your practice, how do you relate to the idea of growth and then maybe degrowth in art writing?
Yeah, I think, but in curating, if there is some sort of progress here, the big question in relation to you is what happened to the figurative Peter? How did he become this Peter? And how he picks up things from other people, other artists he meets, which is a thing that artists hate people saying. And interesting that you have Mark here, that I would be interested to know about how a lecturer in art resists turning one of their students into an epigon of themselves or some sort of a follower. How do they resist that? And and what is it that the art teacher does? Does he, as Mr. Kreber says in this book, does he just turn up for lunch? And I think Mark even talks about it. It's all about asking questions and being curious. The important thing is not to stop questioning.
Mm. Well, I mean, for me, the growth thing is kind of a word that students are really sick of me saying would be like unpacking. You know, it's this idea that you've got, try to get your practice somewhere where there's a lot of stuff to unpack, and it can unpack in all directions. Somebody said their work was going to be about world religion, it probably wouldn't be a good idea, but maybe if it was something about something sort of tangible and unpackable, and something that could be broken into smaller pieces, or that for me is growth, is almost like expansion, because I'm a little older than you, Peter.
Only maybe about 10 years, I think, and that's not.
So, and I'm living with teenagers and stuff like that, and watching them develop and kind of soak up the world and just spit it out. And I think we kind of fit. I really do think we kind of start with a petrol tank full of diesel, and you go as far as you can. And I'm beginning to kind of. I'm beginning to appreciate sort of endurance over innovation at this stage. All of that kind of critical painting kind of positionality that I would have had coming out of London, that you're either on one side of the line or the other. I was never very ideological, but I think younger people are very ideological. And as you get older, you just develop so many skins, and you unpack, and you have so many experiences that you kind of say to yourself, is this the same experience as the last time? Sometimes it is, sometimes there's a little something new. It's very incremental. And you feel, sometimes it feels like you're coming around again to the same thing, but it's never quite the same, and just so important not to get bitter and cynical, I guess. You know, you try to kind of not, because you see things where certain values are put on things maybe that don't deserve that value or whatever, and you've got to just sort of live with that and hope that it, you know, things will keep coming around and everyone will get something. But I think the thing about with growth is about, I've spent the last 3 years as an artist in residence in a primary school teaching college in Dublin, and I've had to kind of unpack art to people who are going to be primary school teachers. And if you ask anybody in Ireland, you know, where they did art, it's in primary school. They didn't do it in secondary, or they didn't go to third level. So most people's experience of art and color and things like that are in the primary sector. And so I thought it was kind of an important role for 3 years. And I found I really had to unpack all the stuff I know into small kind of things that you could kind of roll out in front of people for 40 minutes and then put it away again, almost like opening a box, taking out some, I mean, for instance, Goethe's triangle or whatever, there's lots of models in art history that you can kind of take out, get people to explore and put it away again. And I certainly wouldn't have been able to do that 20 years ago. And when I was teaching you, Peter, I think I wouldn't have been able to do that either. I was still trying to figure out about color, and I would have been quite doctrinaire about things. And now I'm really just less and less sure about things, to be honest. But I know that the value of art is just trying to fill up people's box and see how they unpack it. Frankly speaking, I think I'm waiting for somebody to write a very good book on the internet and how you could probably satisfy most artistic interest or creativity through just having an Instagram account. That might do for most people. Just to curate an Instagram account might be an audience enough for people, and enough attention and enough creativity for people to get by on. So I'm really wondering about like making physical objects and things like that. I'm curious, you know, how it's all going to keep going, and I'm waiting for someone to write a really good book on that, you know.
We are living in a very interesting times. We are living. The last couple of years, well, year and a half, you know, during the pandemic, how has it impacted your work at all? Again, in relation to, do you think you have grown in what you have been doing, or the opposite?
Well, I found
look, I'll just say straight away, I was lucky enough to.
Sorry?
I had a studio. Just to say, in the last year, I had a studio in a campus with 22, maybe say 7 hectares of trees planted by Christian brothers 100 years ago. So they came into my work. I was the only person in the building for about a year, and I've suddenly got all these trees in the paintings. So that has definitely affected me. I think the pandemic, for most artists, most of us are kind of reflective and spend a lot of time on our own in studios anyway, and maybe it wasn't such a huge deal. You know, I suspect a lot of people got a lot of work done, actually. Whether it's any good or not, I'm not sure, but I think a lot of us, you know, had time to maybe read those books we were supposed to read and double down, maybe go back over things. It was quite a good year. I know it's kind of a strange thing to say. But
I've thought a good bit about that, because I thought I wasn't the type of person that would be rushing out of the traps when everything opened up again. But I found myself on, you know, the local news, first in the queue to get into the National Gallery here. But it was for a specific exhibition. But I'm really surprised how quick people have come back. There's so many exhibitions, suddenly everyone's back again. So you feel there's a bit of a panic that if you didn't thrive as much as Mark described, you're in trouble, because everyone else seems to have been very busy and really just ready to exhibit again, because there's loads and loads of shows. But what it did, it really focused me in realizing how important the physical object was. I don't agree with Mark in that I don't think there's any way that the internet or Instagram is going to replace the physical. It just didn't work. It was great to see the different galleries tackling it, Some got it right by not trying to replicate the experience of being in a space. You know, at the beginning, we had some galleries with robots carrying around iPads with your face in it, where you were being led around by this avatar. You know, that was really didn't work. It was sort of funny at the start, but eventually we saw things like the Irish Museum of Modern Art, where they created a whole new program that could work on the internet. So you had artwork, storytelling, writing, and images were used with the knowledge that the people were experiencing on their phone or on this computer as we are now. So I think the galleries were really getting there near just before the opening. They were, and I think they're going to continue a lot more of this sort of, it's a combination. It's going to be a lot more about, you could get a little bit online, but then you can always come into the house later and meet them. It's like a dating thing or something, you know, it's all messaging first, building up a relationship, and then we're going to meet in person. We're going to go back to the gallery. And I had somebody who had from New Zealand talk to me about how he feared that New Zealand mightn't learn all these great lessons that the rest of you know, countries have learned, because they didn't have to. You know, they went for that zero thing, where we've adapted and everything's changed. You know, it's been quite interesting. So I think, no, I'm really heartened by this, you know, realization that you're never going to replace the physical presence and being there. And then, you know, Mark, your art, you talked about probably the subject matter of your art changing, but not the physical matter. You've become a video artist overnight. You're still in love with your canvas. You're still obsessed with color, I'm sure.
Well, actually, I did an animation degree at night over the last year, and so I'm trying to square off some things about potentially about introducing time into it. But no, that's interesting points, Jonathan. I was thinking about you know, the way when Giotto, he kind of unpacked a new space in art, and then I think the Black Death came along and everything paused for about 100 years, and they sort of said, we're not going to pursue this new space. And then you know, they sort of waited. I guess that's not quite what you learn in art history, but you sort of put the two bits of history together and say, how come there was a kind of a gap there? And so it'd be, yeah, it's definitely, we've had time to reflect. And but Peter, just on growth, you know, I suppose the thing with I think you know, a great deal of the value in art since, you know, post-60s has been kind of transgressive and, you know, breaking barriers and being on the barricades and, you know, being at the forefront. And we have it in Ireland. We had a referendum in 2015 that was essentially led by artists, you know, leading social change. And that's a really strong model, and it's really valuable. But you may or may not be kind of involved in that. And, you know, for most artists, you know, you kind of chug along with a set of motifs or a methodology or you know, some kind of technology or something that you've got some skills with. And then you have these kind of moments of kind of crisis where you kind of run out of, you know, things to do, and you wonder, is that it? Like I keep thinking I'm done, you know, with painting, frankly. And I kind of always, and I've been always like that. I kind of have to start all over again. And as Jonathan said, you know, you can't shed your skin. You're still you know, so it still is you, even though you think it's completely different. But so I think there is a kind of a thing, a kind of a starting again, a kind of a falling in love again, getting sick of it, you know, especially when you start seeing yourself. I mean, that would be great danger of being immensely successful. Like some of the contemporaries I was with in the early 90s in London kind of got a signature style and they're pretty much stuck with it. And I can't imagine what that's like, you know, having to do something over 20 or 30 years, you know, however financially rewarding it is, you know.
Yeah. The famous story was Gary Hume painting doors, etc., and he was asked to, you know, keep chucking them out when he eventually, you know, broke with his gallery dropped him actually when he changed. So yeah, it's a big risk.
Yeah, a great heroic story on change would be the Philip Guston story that we all kind of grew up with, where he changed his style and he lost everything. Yeah. And you know, that's the kind of great heroic kind of tale. Yeah, he did the opposite. I've really enjoyed reading. I've really enjoyed reading 9th Street Women. Okay. Go ahead, Jonathan. Sorry.
he did the Philip Guston did the opposite of what Peter did. You know, he moved into figurative because he thought there was so much to be said. You know, we couldn't be farting around with all this abstract stuff. I have to get out there, and there's something, you know. He's very interesting at the moment because of this sort of cancelling of somebody. It's caused a lot of controversy.
I'm gonna have to confess. I remember when I was maybe second year, and I noticed Mark. I realized that before you went to the RCA, you did figurative work, and once I asked you, why did you change? Why did you start making abstract work? And I think I remember you said something on the line that, oh, I don't have time. I have 4 kids, and so basically when I was in college, I was experimenting. Mark, remember this? Experimenting. I did both. I did representational and also abstract. And on one wall I just put everything up, and then I stopped doing representational. So I'm not saying I'm doing abstract work because I don't have time, but that's part of it. That's part of the whole package. You know,
the better way of saying that, Peter, the better way to say that is that you said it's just not having time to paint an ear or a nose or an eye,
exactly.
Really not having the interest.
Exactly.
It's not very interesting to. I mean, that whole Cold War anyway between figuration and abstraction, it just kind of fell away around 1990. I think I taught that it didn't matter, and that there were that those were no longer kind of the Iron Curtain fell away, and figuration, abstraction, the battle. But I think there's a great deal of illustrative work around at the moment, and I do wonder, have they done enough to, there's a human and they're doing something and they're in the woods, and is there enough information, or are they happy, or I do wonder. A smiley face is enough to make a face, and do we need to do more? I don't know.
But that's what I was getting at when I started. It's the idea that art school is where you set up a chance for a relationship to happen, partially with the fellow students. So Peter's fellow students would have an influence if it's working correctly, but certainly with the professor, the teacher, who's you. And I wondered, did Peter wait till he left? When he moved to Chelsea, he made a great shift, and it was there that he moved into the abstraction or non-representational. I thought he said he didn't want to do it in front of you, let's say, because that would be too obvious. So then when you move to London, you change. But just this is 2021. Your friend here, the exact image appears, which is what you based your piece here. And it's just, I love the way it came back into focus. There's that work again, there's something. But where the work in the middle and what Mark, there's something about the artist, I'm going to use your words now, growing, progressing, but it's a personal, you're in your own world. It's about, which is like Frank Zappa said, just got sick of these people. He's like, I produce the work for myself, man, that's primarily number one. It's my journey. I'm creating work, and I'm going somewhere for myself. If you want to buy it, buy it. So there is this sort of thing about the abstract. It's very obviously your own journey, which brings me another thing about growth and progress. You can only grow or progress if there's somebody there waiting to catch what you're kicking in the air, if you know what I mean. That what is the demand for something? What's pulling the work out of you?
Yeah.
That, I mean, in abstract, it's telling me.
It is. It's frightening. Yeah. I agree with you, Jonathan, that it's like I think most people kind of want, you know, have an urge to say something, to respond to the world, to kind of to make something. I think that there is something happening though now in the 21st century where people want to maybe build a boat, make a painting just for a while, you know, not spend their whole lives being a boat builder. Or I think there's kind of something happening in the society where, you know, painting is taking its place alongside baking and a lot of other things, you know, in a kind of a techne kind of flat kind of making world. You know, I really do. It's certainly lost its privileges. It ain't the top of this, you know, the whole thing of it. It really has. I know. I mean, these NFTs and everything. You know, vaguely, you know, see these things flying around, and I'm not going to get involved. But you know, wait for someone else to explain what they are really. But I do think we're taking our place in a kind of a making thing, a kind of putting something out there, and I've no problem with that. I think that's kind of good. As to teaching, I probably never ever wanted to be that kind of German professor where you're making mini me's or anything like that. That would be a disaster. What you always want is kind of somebody to give someone a toolkit and say, look, here's what all these tools do, and good luck. And you know, and it's quite difficult. And also, what's really interesting is I think I always knew this, that art and music and everything changes as you go through life. You take what you need from it. At different stages of your life, you need different things. And you know that when you're trying to show teenagers films that you thought were good, and they're looking at you like, this is rubbish. Like, you know, and you kind of realize, like, I'm in this bubble and these things had a value and were very formative. And so your growth is very subjective and personal, and your output is too. And as Jonathan said, there needs to be a context to catch it. There really does. And I'm sort of working my way through that 9th Street Women book about the women in the 1950s, which is a kind of a rewriting of the abstract expressionist movement from the point of view of a couple of the women artists involved. And it's good. God, is it over timely due, you know, to read about them. And it's a mixed bag. Some of them are interesting and some of them not so. And some of them had disastrous kind of personal lives, but very successful. You know, artworks, and you wonder, well, you know, what does that matter as well? And you know, it's yeah, growth is it's not. It's the other thing is, I think a lot of my work in the 90s, I used to call it natural histories, because I thought each painting kind of grew out of itself, you know, and I just thought the word natural histories covered it. I probably still think that. I certainly have never made a piece of work where I know how it's going to turn out. I'm doing a sculpture at the moment for a playground, and it's changed 3 times over 2 years, even though it's a giant metal sculpture, and that's a disaster. That's like a design screw up. And I work in a college which is very design focused, and they would see, they could talk about 200 steps on a design process, and they talk about failures. And I realized recently the difference between us and designers is that we experiment a lot, you know, we really do, and we don't really recognize failures as such. Where the designers, you know, it's a drop, it's a fail, and you got to get back up on the horse again. And we don't kind of see it that way, I guess.
I'm a bit conscious. I'm not sure if Zoom is not going to cut us off.
Yeah, it flashed up something there, a warning.
Yeah. So I think we can wrap up, because I'm really conscious, and I don't want this to end very abruptly. Jonathan, is there anything you want to add, or what I picked up what you were saying, Jonathan, Mark, that growth is not something exponential. I think you mentioned something like this.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of metaphors around, biblical metaphors around growth and scattering seeds and things, and onto barren land or fertile land, or, you know, but I think Jonathan hit the nail on the head that this thing has to happen there has to be somebody to receive it, to catch it, you know, I mean.
But that somebody can be, you know, it can be happening in a gallery. It can be, you know, your spouse or your whoever. It can, you know, I think.
Yeah.
Especially last year, you couldn't show your work to nobody, you know, and did you grow? I'm sure you did.
Yeah. Well, I did go to one other, the Zoom meetings about the art of political satire or writing, and it was with the Guardian. But she did say, get your ideas out, even if there's nowhere to put them. Don't save them all in a drawer. You know, she was in relation to writers or people. If you're great, I've had loads and loads of ideas that I had nowhere to put during the lockdown. So she said, just get them out, write them for yourself, but just don't save them for a rainy day. Is that abstract enough for you? Good luck with your degrowth, Peter.
Thank you very much. I think we're going to wrap it up. It was really, really nice to see you after a good while. So I wish you both good luck. Okay.
And
thank you. Bye bye.